The house on Dover Ridge, Skagit County, Washington, has been empty for 20 years. The neighbors stopped asking questions about it a decade ago. The real estate agents stopped trying to sell it around the same time. It just sits there. Pale blue siding gone gray. Windows like dead eyes. A for sale sign so faded you can barely read the number. But if you go inside, and I did, with permission from the estate, you'll find something strange. Robert Vance's bedroom is still intact. The bed is made. A calendar on the wall is frozen on March 2006. There are drawings taped to the walls, dozens of them. Maps. Detailed, obsessive maps of streets, drainage systems, forest trails, escape routes. On the desk, there's a broken metronome. Someone tried to fix it once. There's duct tape around the base, a battery that's long dead. And if you pull the air vent cover off the wall, like two urban explorers did last spring, you'll find something that changes everything. Torn pieces of maps. Folded so small they're almost invisible. Each one marked with arrows, with safe houses, with distances measured in careful handwriting. This is the story of an 11-year-old autistic boy who disappeared in 2006. For 20 years, people assumed he was dead. They were wrong. Before we proceed, please take a minute to hit the subscribe button. This shows your support for bringing these kind of cold cases to limelight and exposing evil in plain sight. Also, let me know where you're watching from. I want to be sure that this case is heard all around the world and we're creating enough awareness. Now let's continue. Robert Vance was born in 1995 in a small coastal town called Seabrook Point. By the time he was 5, it was clear he experienced the world differently than other kids. He was autistic, though back then in the early 2000s, the diagnosis came with a lot of misunderstanding. Robert's former teacher, M.S. Alden, in describing Robert said, "Robert was brilliant, actually. He had this incredible ability to see patterns. He'd draw these maps, fictional towns, real neighborhoods, places he'd never been. Every street labeled. Every distance calculated. It was like he was building a database in his head." Robert's mother, Elise Vance, raised him alone for the first 6 years of his life. His biological father, Stephen Vance, had left when Robert was a toddler, couldn't handle the demands of parenting a child with additional needs. Elise worked 2 jobs. She was exhausted, overwhelmed, but she loved her son. The neighbor, Mrs. Kettering, when interviewed, said this about Elise. Elise was a good mother. You could see it. She'd walk Robert to the bus stop every morning, holding his hand. He'd wear these big noise-canceling headphones, hated loud sounds. She was patient with him. More patient than a lot of parents would have been. Robert had routines. Routines mattered. He counted fence posts on the walk home from school, always the same number, always the same route. He used a metronome to calm himself when the world got too loud. He drew maps constantly, on notebook paper, on napkins, on the backs of receipts. His teachers described him as gentle, quiet, a boy who lived inside his own carefully constructed world. And then, in 2001, when Robert was 6, Grant Fallow entered their lives. Grant Fallow was a logistics coordinator for a shipping company. Organized, methodical, authoritative. To Elise, he seemed like the answer to years of struggle. Interview clip with Elise's former coworker, Diane. She said, she was so relieved when she met Grant. She'd say things like, "Finally, someone who can help me give Robert structure." She thought structure was what Robert needed. They married in 2002, when Robert was 7. At first, it seemed fine. Grant moved into their house on Dover Ridge. He set up chore charts, family schedules, rules. Robert, who thrived on predictability, initially adapted. But slowly, so slowly that even Elise didn't notice at first, the structure became something else. Grant didn't just create routines. He controlled them. Dinner at 6 p.m. Not 6:05. Not 5:55. 6. Homework at the kitchen table. No headphones. No breaks. Eye contact during conversations. Full sentences. No stimmying. Interview clip with Robert's school counselor, Mr. Tavers. I met Robert a few times when he was in 3rd grade. He'd started having more meltdowns at school, sensory overload mostly. But when I'd ask him about home, he'd just say, "I have to follow the rules." Over and over. I have to follow the rules. Grant reframed every interaction as discipline, as teaching Robert how to function in the real world. But Robert wasn't functioning. He was surviving. By 2005, when Robert was 10, the maps had changed. Miss Alden says. He stopped drawing fictional towns. He started drawing the house. Over and over. The layout. The doors. The windows. And then, escape routes. Arrows pointing to exits. I didn't understand it at the time. I thought it was just his way of processing space. It wasn't. Robert was planning. In October 2005, a teacher noticed bruising on Robert's arm. Not a lot. Just finger-shaped marks. Like someone had grabbed him. The school reported it to Child Protective Services, as they were required to do. During an interview with Mr. Tavers, here is what he had to say. A social worker came out. I was there for part of the interview. Robert, he couldn't explain what happened in a way that made sense to the investigator. He'd say things like, I broke the rule about standing still, or I made too much noise. The social worker kept asking, did someone hurt you? And Robert would just repeat, I broke the rule. Grant was calm during the investigation. Articulate. He explained that Robert sometimes had meltdowns, that he'd had to physically redirect him for safety reasons. Elise backed him up completely. The case was closed within 2 weeks. Interview clip with Mr. Tavers. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't have proof. And Robert wouldn't, or couldn't, tell us what was really happening. What was really happening was this. Grant had decided that Robert's autism was a behavior problem, something that could be fixed with enough discipline. When Robert stymied, flapped his hands, rocked back and forth, Grant would make him stand still for an hour. Hands at his sides. No movement. When Robert had a meltdown, Grant would isolate him in his room. No comfort. No explanation. Just silence. And when Robert tried to use his maps, his drawings, his metronome, the things that helped him regulate, Grant would confiscate them. You need to live in the real world, Robert. By early 2006, Robert was 11, and something in him had started to resist. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in small ways. He'd hide his drawings. He'd mark fence posts with chalk on his walk home, tiny arrows that no one else noticed. He was building something, a map that existed outside the house, outside Grant's control. And then, in February 2006, everything escalated. Interview clip of Ms. Alden. There was a fire drill. Robert hated fire drills, the noise, the chaos. He had a meltdown in the hallway. We got him to the nurse's office, calmed him down. But when he got home, I don't know what happened. But the next day, he was different. Quieter. More afraid. What happened was this. Grant interpreted the meltdown as acting out. As Robert embarrassing the family. That night, he made Robert stand in the hallway under the bright overhead light for 3 hours. No movement. No speaking. Just standing. Elise watched from the kitchen. Said nothing. The neighbor, Mrs. Kettering, narrating her part of the incident, said, I heard yelling that night. Through the walls. I almost called someone. But I didn't. I thought, it's not my business. God, I wish I had. Over the next month, Grant's control tightened. Robert's headphones, the ones he used to manage sensory overload, were confiscated. You don't need them at home. His sketchbook, where he drew his maps, was taken away. You're spending too much time in your head. Even his metronome, the one thing that calmed him when the world got too loud, was locked in Grant's office. Mr. Tavers, during an interview session, said, I called the house a few times. Tried to check in. Grant always answered. Always said Robert was fine. Just going through a phase. I asked to speak to Robert directly once. Grant said he was doing homework. Couldn't be disturbed. But Robert wasn't doing homework. He was planning. He'd started marking his route home from school with chalk. Small arrows on fence posts, on curbs, on drainage grates. Invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for them. He'd memorized the location of every culvert, every drainage tunnel, every hiding spot within a 5-mile radius. He was building an escape route. And he was running out of time. On March 10, 2006, Grant found Robert's hidden sketchbook. The one Robert had been keeping in a ripped seam inside his mattress. It was full of maps. Detailed maps. Routes out of the house. Safe places. Distances calculated down to the meter. Grant didn't just take it. He shredded it. In front of Robert. Page by page. The forensic psychologist, Dr. Ellen Morris words. For an autistic child, especially one like Robert who used drawing as a regulatory tool, that act would have been devastating. It wasn't just destroying a notebook. It was destroying his voice. His safety net. Robert didn't cry. Didn't scream. He just watched. And that night, he gathered the torn pieces. Every single one. And he hid them in the air vent in his room. 20 years later, those pieces would be the key to solving his disappearance. Elise Vance knew something was wrong. She had to know. But knowing and acting are two different things. In an interview with Elise's therapist, Dr. Sarah Lynn, recorded 2018, she said, Elise came to me in 2018, 12 years after Robert disappeared. She was broken. She said, I knew Grant was too hard on him. I knew. But I was so tired. And I thought if Robert just learned to follow the rules, everything would be okay. On March 12, 2006, Elise tried to intervene. Robert had come home from school and gone straight to his room. No snack. No homework. Just silence. Elise knocked on his door. Robert? Honey, are you okay? No answer. She opened the door. Robert was sitting on his bed, staring at the wall. Talk to me, sweetheart. Can we move out? The question hung in the air. What? Can we leave? Just you and me. Like before. Elise sat down next to him. And for just a moment, she considered it. But then Grant's voice came from downstairs. Elise? Where are you? And the moment passed. We can't, honey. This is our home. Robert looked at her. And in his eyes, she saw something she'd never seen before. Resignation. Okay, he said quietly. That was the last real conversation they ever had. On March 14, 2006, Robert overheard a conversation he wasn't supposed to hear. Grant was on the phone in his office. Door closed. But Robert was in the hallway, and the walls were thin. I'm telling you, he's not improving. If anything, he's getting worse. I've been looking into residential programs. Places that specialize in behavioral issues. A pause. No, Elise doesn't know yet. I'll tell her when the time is right. Another pause. It's not about giving up. It's about getting him the help he needs. Help we can't provide. Robert stood frozen in the hallway. Residential program. He didn't know exactly what that meant. but he knew it meant being sent away, being removed. That night, he pulled out a fresh piece of paper, and he drew one final map. Every drainage tunnel, every culvert, every safe house within 10 miles. He folded it, made it small enough to fit in his shoe, and he waited. March 15th, 2006. Robert came home from school. Grant was waiting. "We need to talk about your behavior." Robert said nothing. "I've been patient with you, Robert. More patient than most people would be. But you're not improving. You're not trying." "I am trying." "Don't interrupt me." Grant made Robert stand in the hallway, hands at his sides. No movement. 1 hour passed. Then 2. Robert's legs were shaking. His sensory system was overloading. The lights were too bright. The silence was too loud. And then something inside him snapped. He ran. Out the back door. Across the yard. Into the marsh. Behind him, he heard Grant shouting, "Robert, get back here." But Robert didn't stop. He followed the map in his head. The one he'd memorized. The one he'd been building for months. Left at the drainage grate. Right at the old fence. Straight through the culvert under the highway. He left chalk arrows as he went. Small. Deliberate. Breadcrumbs for a rescue that might never come. Elise called 911 at 8:47 p.m. "My son is missing. He ran away. Please, you have to find him." Police arrived within 20 minutes. Grant gave them a description. 11 years old. Autistic. Wearing a blue jacket. Likely disoriented. "He does this sometimes," Grant said. "Runs off when he's upset. He usually comes back." The search began immediately. Officers found the first chalk arrow at 9:15 p.m. Then the second. Then the third. The retired Officer Daniels had this to say: "We followed those arrows for about 3 miles. And then they just stopped. There was a storm that night. Heavy rain. Washed everything away." The search continued for 3 days. Volunteers combed the marsh. Divers checked the waterways. Search dogs tracked Robert sent to the highway, and then lost it. On March 18, 2006, the search was scaled back. On March 25, it was officially suspended. Robert Vance was presumed dead. For 20 years, the house on Dover Ridge sat empty. Elise couldn't bring herself to sell it. Couldn't bring herself to erase the last place Robert had been. She died in 2024. Heart failure. The doctors said it was medical, but everyone who knew her said it was grief. In the spring of 2026, 2 urban explorers broke into the house. They posted videos online, exploring the abandoned home of a missing child. One of them pulled the air vent cover off the wall in Robert's room, and found the maps. Torn pieces. Folded tight. Each one marked with routes, distances, safe houses. The video went viral. Within days, a documentary team contacted the local police. "We think Robert Vance might still be alive." Using the maps, investigators reconstructed Robert's escape route. They followed it farther than the original search had gone. Past the highway. Into a rural area 20 miles outside Seabrook Point. And there, in a small artist community, they found him. Robert Vance. Now 31 years old. Living under the name River Calloway. Working as a trail designer for a state park. Detective Sarah Kendrick had this to say: "When we showed up, he knew immediately why we were there. He said, 'I was wondering when someone would find me.'" Robert had survived. After escaping, he'd hidden in a drainage tunnel for 2 days. Then he'd walked 4 miles until he reached a small town. A woman named Cynthia Hale found him at a bus stop. 11 years old. Alone. Terrified. She didn't call the police. She should have. But she didn't. She took him in. Fed him. Let him stay. And when he told her, in his careful, literal way, "I can't go back. He'll hurt me," she believed him. During an interview with Cynthia, here is what she has to say. "I know what I did was illegal. But I looked at that boy, and I saw someone who'd been running for his life. I couldn't send him back." Robert lived with Cynthia for 6 years. Then, at 17, he moved out on his own. Got a job. Built a quiet life. He never contacted his mother. Never tried to find out what happened to the family he'd left behind. "I thought if I stayed gone, I'd be safe," he told investigators. DNA confirmed his identity in April 2026. The case was officially closed after 20 years. If you have come this far, let me know what you think about this cold case. Show your support for victims by subscribing and sharing this video. You are doing your part in exposing evil. Grant Fallow died in 2019. Heart attack. He never faced charges. Elise Vance died in 2024, never knowing her son was alive. Robert Vance, River Calloway, still lives in that small artist community. He designs trails. Maps safe routes through forests. He doesn't give interviews. Doesn't want attention. But he agreed to answer one question. "Why didn't you ever come back?" He thought for a long time. Then he said, "Because I drew a map to survive. And it worked." The maps Robert made saved his life. But they couldn't save the childhood he lost. Or the mother who spent 20 years believing he was dead. This is the story of a boy who disappeared. And the system that never learned how to see him.